Hello, welcome to another Sunday Night Live. It's been a while. This used to be a more regular thing. So hopefully, there are those of you out there that remembered Sunday Night Live and were excited to come join in. So, this should be hopefully streaming live right now on both the Total Canine Facebook page and the YouTube page or channel. So let me know that you're here, post a comment, say hello, let me know everything's working. It looks like everything is working. I have thumbs up, so that's good news. I decided to do an AMA session for the first back because it's been so long. And what is an AMA? So it's an Ask Me Anything. I really wanted to, rather than have a set topic that people may or may not be interested in, leave this up to you guys to ask questions. So, hi, Sharon. So post your questions in the comments and I will go through them. I am going to try and limit this to probably questions for the first 30 minutes. Anything that comes after 30 minutes, we'll see if I get to or not, but I don't want this to go too long. I'm also not going to answer necessarily any questions once this is posted as a recording. I wait for a little bit when I get notifications, but this isn't going to be an endless thread where you can always ask any questions. So while you guys are thinking of what you want to ask, hi, Rebecca. I did figure that I would chime in a little bit about something that I've been seeing a lot of like pop up. Hi, Annie. Around, I don't know what it is, if I'm just like, I'm more aware of it because I've been doing a lot of stuff on it, or kind of what's going on. But I just wanted to quickly, again, just while waiting for questions, talk a little bit about hip dysplasia, because I still see the same things kind of coming up over and over again. And it's going to be brief, not a whole lecture on it, but I just want to say, so hip dysplasia is, what you can think of it is passive laxity in the joint. The joint is too loose. It is moving around too much, causing abnormal wear. Now, you can have a joint that is too loose with everything looking normal conformation-wise. It doesn't necessarily mean there has to be bad conformation. If there is bad conformation, that definitely contributes more to the looseness and the inappropriate wearing. The biggest thing that I want to hammer home is that you do not need to wait until your dog has symptoms of pain before doing anything. So if your dog is diagnosed with hip dysplasia, whether it's because you have done something like a pen hip test or an ortolani, and it has been noted that there is laxity in that joint, or you have had x-rays and they show not great conformation, you don't need to sit and do nothing waiting for the dog to become symptomatic. There are things that you can do to hopefully never have the dog become symptomatic. Because again, just because your dog has been diagnosed with hip dysplasia doesn't mean that they have to eventually become symptomatic. If you are doing things ahead of time with the diagnosis, then you can hopefully prevent the dog from ever having any major symptoms. So that is one of the reasons why I recommend early screening of the hips, especially if you're going to do sports, but also if you have any breeds that are more prone to hip dysplasia. And I say that with an asterisk because I think a lot of breeds we might think of as, oh, they don't have hip problems, actually do. The biggest one that comes to my mind is Shetland sheepdogs. You know, they're not a large breed. So they kind of, I think, get ignored when, thinking about hip dysplasia. Yet I tend to see it quite frequently in the breed. And I do wonder if part of that is they weren't screened a lot for it. So that's just what I'm going to say about hip dysplasia. One, if the dog has been diagnosed through appropriate means, which also means appropriate x-rays that are positioned well, it is not going to go away. Your dog is going to not suddenly be cured of hip dysplasia, but you can do things so that the dog hopefully does not become symptomatic for it, or it is very slow to progress to symptoms of hip dysplasia. So just wanted to put that out there to get people thinking about questions to ask. If you do want to know more about hip dysplasia, I do have a hip dysplasia class that's fully finished. It is, so it would be self-guided. Once you buy it, you have access to it forever. It goes through all the definitions of hip dysplasia, the diagnosis, what you can do if your dog is diagnosed, and some strengthening to think about, and other preventative measures for minimizing symptoms. So if you're interested in that, I have the link all over my Facebook page, but it is a class on Teachable, although I don't think it's showing up on my Teachable homepage. So you'd need to go through the link on the Facebook page. So I did finally get the first question from Brittany. What are my thoughts on treadmills? So I don't have a problem with treadmills. Again, I do have an online workshop that is teaching dogs how to use treadmills, some problem solving with getting them used to treadmills, some workouts that you can do. That's all available through Teachable, but it's also available through my website. I prefer outdoor exercise if you can make it happen. When I lived in New Mexico and Colorado, I very much was like, I'll never need a treadmill. I can go out. We have sunshine almost year round with very few days where the weather is bad. And, if I have to skip those going outside and exercising with the dog, it's not that big of a deal. Moving to the Pacific Northwest definitely became a different story, where I was, I had a point where I was just like, you know what, I don't want to go out in the rain anymore, so I'm getting a treadmill. I also do like using a treadmill for rehab as well. I like the ability to control the speed. I like the ability to isolate movement with it. So I like it. I think the biggest downfall to it is just like I exercise on a treadmill. I think it can get boring. And I think you have to be really aware of the speed, making sure it's appropriate. And I will say, oftentimes with speed, people are going too slow. And that's why the dogs like it. So speeding it up is better. So I do like treadmills. I think they can be used for exercise. I actually am rearranging things at my house to better use my treadmill, because right now it's in the garage and I don't really like going out there. It's cold. So I need a spot for inside, so because it is winter, rainy season in Pacific Northwest, and I would like to get my dogs on it more. So yes, good question. So Brittany has some follow-ups. I'm gonna guess this is my dogs get a lot outside, use for supplemental and prevent Eli from hurting himself. So yeah, I always am gonna prefer outside exercise. If I have the ability to do that, I'm gonna choose that. Sometimes, whether it's like time that I just don't have time to get them in the car to go someplace where they can run, whatever it is, I think treadmills can be used. Would I use treadmills as my dog's only form of exercise? No. I don't like that. If that's all I can do, at least it's something. But I would always highly, highly push for getting out and getting more freedom of movement than always just being on a treadmill. One of the things that I think about in comparing this is like when my dogs are out running off leash, they are not going the same speed for 20 minutes. It is constant slowing down, speeding up, sprinting, sniffing, stopping and sniffing. There's lots of variability, right? And there's also variability in the surface that they're running on. And I think that is very important for their exercise than just being like, you're going on a treadmill and I'm going to have you go for 20 minutes at, 5 miles an hour. The dogs necessarily aren't going to be like, this is boring, it sucks. They might be excited that they just get to do something. But I have to think that like it's not the most enjoyable exercise and probably not best for them. But is it like using a treadmill bad? No, it is okay to do. Just, try and do more. Brittany says weather doesn't stop up, which is good. I didn't think weather would stop me either, but it eventually did. So I gave up and I got the treadmill. Again, it is not something that I'm necessarily going to do every day, but I have it when it's needed. Okay, so Sharon has a question. Is there any exercise or other home treatment to help increase the elasticity of an old iliopsoas injury that has substantial scar tissue? So anytime you have an old injury, especially if there's scar tissue, yes, the elasticity, the stretch of the muscle is going to be affected. Iliopsoas is a hard one because of where it is. It's deep, and most of the time the injury is around the musculotendinous junction, which is even like harder to get at. So like manual therapy on it probably is going to be fairly difficult. The other thing I would think about, again, rehab brain would be potentially trying to get some ultrasound therapy to maybe work on that. My thought is having the element of heat on the muscle and then stretching while it is being heated to get as much elasticity as possible out of it. Things like any of like your hip extension type exercises are going to stretch that iliopsoas. I would be just very careful in doing them. Even if you feel like it's pretty good and you know what the limit is, I still would probably always take that exercise as like a starting low and within that session building up height to get a stretch for it. But yeah, that's a tough one. I would think obviously, like I said, I would probably default a bit more to like modalities than specific exercises because I do think the exercises the dog probably has learned a way to cheat through it. And my guess would be keeping some flexion in the spine while you're asking for an iliopsoas stretch is the way that they would try to cheat through it. So good question, tough one. And I'll keep thinking about it. And if anything pops up, I'll let you know. Okay, Susan asks, can the same for preventing hip dysplasia symptoms be said for DM? There's been talk about a big upswing in DM showing up in Cavalier. So for everyone out there, DM is degenerative myelopathy. And the easy answer is no. Degenerative myelopathy is obviously, but like its name, a degenerative disease. It is as basically the equivalent that we kind of compare it to in humans is Lou Gehrig disease. Once it has been diagnosed, we start seeing symptoms. A very heavy duty rehab program has been shown to be beneficial, but there's not anything. I mean, obviously, I do think keeping the dog fit and strong may be your best bet, but there's nothing specific that we can say, okay, this is going to help slow down the progression of DM or minimize symptoms the way we can with hip dysplasia. Hip dysplasia being laxity of the joint, we can strengthen the muscles to help slow down progression. So not a positive answer, but yeah, unfortunately, the DM is not something that I think there's going to be more to come. There's a lot of research out there right now. It's pretty much one of these things of in the general kind of vet world, you get the diagnosis and it kind of a lot of talk almost about like hospice care. I don't think it has to be like that. I do think doing rehab has shown a lot of benefit to slow down the symptoms, but I don't think there's anything that necessarily will prevent the symptoms from showing up. Okay, Julie asks, are there any supplements you recommend for a healthy dog? I would say, oh, this is tough. If you had asked me this like 3 months ago, I would have had a flat out answer, 100%, like hands down. Now things have changed. I don't know yet what I want to use. Generally speaking, I do think for healthy dogs, having them on some kind of omega-3, omega-6 fatty acid is a good idea. I think potentially a green-lipped mussel type joint supplement also can be beneficial. Again, healthy dogs that are active in sports, I would say more so than just a healthy pet dog. I would rather like a healthy pet dog focus on fitness, and I do worry about if they're not getting a lot of exercise, adding in these supplements, especially like an omega-3, omega-6 fatty acid supplement, we're adding calories into their diet may also make it hard for them to maintain a good weight. Versus a healthy active dog, a healthy sport dog, I do think like having that omega supplement and a joint supplement can be beneficial. I also say with supplements, this is what I tell all my clients, a lot of times I give a supplement or I like a supplement because it makes me feel good that I'm giving it to the dog. Not that I necessarily know that's going to have huge benefit to them. So hopefully that makes sense. I am a big kind of non-supplement that is often used like a supplement. I am a big proponent of Adequan used preventatively, but that goes down a whole nother kind of realm of it's a prescription, so it's not really a supplement, but because it's a prescription, we know it's effective and safe, but it's still a prescription, so using it preventatively is very much off-label, blah, 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 blah. So happy to answer questions about Adequan, but just know I can talk about it for hours probably. So Amber asks, I was wondering if this was going to come up and if I should just plan a whole separate talk about it. So Amber asks, curious about your opinion about the monoclonal antibody injections, especially the most recent and heavily pushed Librela. Librela is a anti-nerve growth factor drug. In my opinion, it is a drug to be used with moderate to severe arthritis that has not been well controlled by any other means. So it is more of a end of the line drug. I do not think it should be used on dogs who are not symptomatic. I do not think it should be used on dogs with minimal symptoms that nothing else has been done. I do not think it should be used on young dogs. And I do think it should, when it is appropriate to give it, it should be used with caution. The dog, especially with the first couple injections, should be observed for 15-30 minutes after the injection is given. And if the dog has any neurologic symptoms, even if it also has moderate to severe arthritis, it probably should not be used. Again, because it's anti-nerve growth factor, it doesn't do anything to stop the progression of arthritis or change the environment in the joint. It is a pain blocker. And unfortunately, because of that, I do think it has the potential to get misused. And unfortunately, because of that, we are also seeing some scary things being reported with use of it. I have been following it since it was released in England way back when. It seems like forever because I do have colleagues, and I was really excited. So when it came out in England, I was asking all my colleagues in England, hey, what do you think? How's it going? And basically the general consensus I got was meh. It works on some dogs, doesn't work on others. And when you look at the studies that were used to show efficacy, it is a very small percentage of dogs that actually significantly responded to it. And so I don't think it's a miracle drug. And I think anytime someone tells you there are absolutely no side effects, red flags should go off in your head because there is not a single drug out there that does not have side effects. So that's my opinion. Hopefully that answers your question. It is not that I will not use it or carry it. I think it has its place. I think it is being misused at this point. Too many people I know of in the US, as soon as it came out, were being told to give it to their dogs when they had no evidence of arthritis, no symptoms. And I'm like, no, that's actually potentially going to cause more problems if you give it to those dogs. So I think, again, moderate to severe symptomatic arthritis. One thing I forgot to say with that is for me to give it, there must be radiographic evidence of the arthritis, not just pain that I suspect is from arthritis. I must see it on a radiograph and no neurologic symptoms present. So good question. I do have a feeling that Librela might become its own Sunday Night Live topic in the future. So just be ready. Okay, Nancy has a rehab questions. One of our border collies had a cruciate injury 5 days ago. We have her in an X-Pen and can't decide whether she should have a stable surface low bed or one of our 8-inch thick orthopedic beds, which I feel is so soft she needs to work a bit when standing up. It's not squishy, but it's the egg crate foam. So stable surface low bed or squish. I would actually try both and make the decision based on which one is easier for her to get on and off. If the 8-inch thick orthopedic bed, she doesn't have any issues with it, then it's fine to use. And honestly, I would be kind of surprised if that one gave her as much trouble. I think that the dogs typically, even after cruciate surgery, are pretty, leg is pretty stable. It's been, is able to handle that kind of unstable surface. But I do think it is something that you can ask the dog and also see, like, is one easier than the other. I don't think you necessarily, like, the thicker bed is going to do anything to necessarily aid in healing, but sometimes it's just nicer to sleep on something a little bit more comfortable. If it is something that, like, that is what she is used to sleeping on, again, I would probably err to using it rather than the other one. 5 days out of surgery, I would also still be using a sling probably to help the dog get up and down, like in and out of the X-Pen. So again, that's another thing that you can use to help kind of keep protected, even if you do use the 8-inch thick bed. Not sure if that really helps you make a decision. But hopefully it makes you feel a little bit better about it's okay to try both and see if one is better tolerated. Okay, Julie asks, what is your opinion on red light therapy? So red light therapy, unfortunately, is one of those names that can be really defined a lot of ways. I mean, technically, you say laser is red light therapy. It's just that in most of the laser that you're going to get in the hospital, it is out of the visible spectrum for humans, but it is still in that red spectrum on the light wave spectrum. So kind of, I think of like red light therapy as it is still in the visible spectrum. So it is a lower wavelength, usually in the 600s. Now we know that lower wavelength is not going to be as effective as the higher wavelengths. And kind of two things. One, it doesn't penetrate as deep into the tissue. And that's actually with the wavelength. It usually, doesn't penetrate as deep in the tissue. And then two, what tends to go along with things that are called red light therapy is they're very low power. And because of that, it requires much longer treatment time to get any kind of effective dose. So I think I wouldn't spend my money on anything that is a red light therapy. I don't think it's going to do much, except potentially if the dog has some skin issues, derm issues, it could help with that. The inflammation of the skin and dermal layers may help with very superficial sore muscles. But other than that, I don't think it's going to do much. So I personally, I wouldn't spend money on any kind of red light therapy. I think if your dog needs laser, there are lasers out there that you can talk to your rehab vet about getting for home use. I have one I prescribe out to my clients for home use that can be done either on a rental basis or they can buy them outright. And I think those are much more beneficial and effective than any kind of red light therapy. Okay, Susan says, oh, Jax, I think this is a relation. So Jax tested for the DM, so we're not letting you go anywhere. And just know that the DNA tests for DM are not necessarily like, what's the words? It's just because you test genetically that you carry it, it doesn't necessarily mean you will be affected. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay, Sharon says, on that topic, what is your opinion on Myos muscle supplement for old dogs? So as dogs get older, it does get harder for them to maintain muscle mass. So I do think Myos can play a beneficial role with older dogs and helping them keep up their muscle mass and strength. So I would more likely turn Myos into a regular daily supplement for an older dog than a healthy, adult or young adult dog. Another follow-up from Sharon. Do you have an opinion on the efficacy of Myos muscle supplement for old dogs? Efficacy. Well, it's hard to say. So the big thing with older dogs maintaining muscle, or what we call sarcopenia, which is like the inability or muscle loss due to age, it is a process that is hard to negate. So I tend to be using the Myos more for trying to keep what we have as best as possible to maintain muscle. I'm not necessarily going to get more muscle put on. I do, using it, Myos with exercise, I think can be very beneficial in maintaining it. Have I seen as big of a results as I have with using Myos after surgery? Probably not. But I may be a little biased in that because I do think I see much more dogs post-surgery than I do older dogs that were just trying to keep fit and healthy. So I think I may not have the number to compare to as much with the older dogs. But I do like Myos. I am a big fan of using Myos after surgery or injury, and then with dogs as they get older to maintain muscle. Or if you're on something, that potentially makes it harder for them to maintain muscle mass, like if the dog is on a steroid for some reason, I often do put them on Myos as well to try and maintain as much muscle as possible. Amber says, okay, do you think this is about the Librela? I'm disappointed how it's been presented by the distributor, leaving out any possible negative side effects. Yeah, I think unfortunately it is being presented as this miracle drug, and I have already had to have many talks with people when their regular vet is recommending it to be like, no, it's actually not the most appropriate drug for what's going on, especially because I do like to use Adequan preventatively, and Adequan is labeled for the treatment of arthritis. So I have had other vets see me recommend Adequan for their clients and say, oh, well, instead of Adequan, we can use Librela. And I'm like, oh, no. I'm not actually saying this dog has arthritis. I'm not using the Adequan to treat arthritis. I am using the Adequan to prevent the arthritis. Not that I already think the dog has it and is symptomatic, but the dog, for example, maybe it's something like the dog just had cruciate surgery, and when they did the surgery, they were like, the joint looks great. But now that it's had joint surgery, we know it's more prone to developing arthritis in that joint. I would never give them Librela for that right then when there is no arthritis in that joint yet. But I would start them on Adequan to try and keep that joint as healthy as possible. So, and that just fits in April asking about using Adequan as a preventative. So the way Adequan works is it actually works to keep the cartilage healthy. So if you have no cartilage left in your joint, it is not going to work. So oftentimes, it's one of those things where people will be like, oh, I tried Adequan and it didn't do anything. When I hear that, I think two things. One, either the arthritis was so bad, it was already bone on bone, and then the Adequan's not going to make a difference. or the dog didn't actually have joint issues. It had most likely neurologic issues that were misdiagnosed. Adequan, by keeping the cartilage healthy, it is better to start it as early as possible, because once cartilage is damaged and gone, there is no reversing that. But if we can keep what cartilage is there happy and healthy, we're going to stop actually the arthritis cycle. So what happens in the joint when there's something to start the inflammation, start the arthritic process is, so there's inflammation in the joint that damages the cartilage. The cartilage then breaks off and is floating around in the joint. The body says, oh my God, that cartilage shouldn't be there floating around in the joint, sends in cells to attack it, break it down, which causes more inflammation, which then the inflammation damages the cartilage again, and the process just keeps going until there's no cartilage left. So the Adequan helps keep that cartilage nice and healthy, so it is not breaking off and causing that body's reaction to a foreign substance in the joint. And so in its own way, like I always kind of joke, like one of Adequan's side effects is that it is actually an anti-inflammatory. It is not labeled to be an anti-inflammatory, but in a way, it works to keep inflammation out of the joint. So for me, I'm not going to necessarily, and I definitely don't put every sport dog on Adequan as a preventative. I do look more at, are there higher risk for this dog developing arthritis? And that is why we should put them on Adequan earlier or sooner rather than later. Examples of higher risk are hip dysplasia, just having had a cruciate ligament surgery, having had any joint surgery, having osteochondrosis or osteochondritis or osteochondrosis dissecans as a adolescent, any juvenile orthopedic disease. I could probably think of others, but those are like the big ones. Elbow dysplasia, coming to mind right now that I would put the dog on Adequan sooner rather than later. So even if they weren't symptomatic for any kind of arthritis at that point, I would still put them on Adequan. I've also used Adequan preventatively for dogs that have had chronic tick disease like Ehrlichia or Lyme that maybe took a while to get diagnosed and potentially has some joint damage because of the chronicity. I have also used it for immune-mediated arthritis as well, not to treat the immune-mediated arthritis, but to help keep the joints healthy after the immune-mediated arthritis has gone into remission. So hopefully that answers your question about Adequan as a preventative. It tends to be completely used differently in the rehab sports medicine veterinary side of things than in your general vet or orthopedic vet side of things. Although I think a lot of orthopedists are more towards the rehab side, like your general vet. Oh, the other thing about Adequan that I'm going to say, you can give it sub-Q, even though it's off-label. We've been giving it sub-Q forever. It works just as well as IM, and your dog will love you a lot more if you give it sub-Q. Okay, more Adequan questions. Kayla asks, how often do you administer Adequan when using it as preventative? Do you give it in the muscle or subcutaneously? Okay, cool. I already answered part of that. So I always sub-Q. I've been giving it sub-Q for really since my internship year, I would say. So it's going on 16 years. And there are white papers that were done when Novartis was still distributing it, showing that the sub-Q, it still gets to the joints. So we do have actual scientific evidence that it works just fine sub-Q. Administering Adequan when it's a preventative. So again, that a little bit depends on kind of like my risk factor of why I'm giving it. So for example, my own dog who had OC in the shoulder and OCD in the stifle, he gets it every 2 weeks. But he had surgical intervention as an adolescent, and especially OCD in the stifle is one of the joints that where OCD is much riskier, has the potential for a much worse outcome down the line rather than the shoulder. So I do try to give it often for him, even though he has never been symptomatic since his surgery or recovering from surgery. He's now almost 6 years old and hasn't been a problem. For a lot of dogs, again, if they're asymptomatic and maybe it's something where they had joint surgery, like a cruciate, and there's, again, was no evidence of arthritis in the knee, and once they get past, like, recover from surgery, no symptoms, I would probably do it once a month. Elbow dysplasia tends to be a little bit more problematic. That I probably do twice a month. Like, so again, there's kind of like treat everyone as an individual and, weigh their risk factor. But, I also take into account other things, how, like, if does the owner have to come in for the shot because they just don't feel like they can give it themselves, then I might go down to once a month as long as I wasn't seeing any symptoms popping up. It is something that if I start seeing symptoms, so even if I'm giving it once a month, if I start seeing changes, start seeing symptoms, I have ability to increase frequency. You can go up to giving it twice a week, every week. You can do that for longer than 4 weeks if you need to. You just shouldn't go more often than twice a week. We know Adequan stays in the joint for about 95 hours. And so that's where that like twice a week dosing comes from as the loading dose. It's basically trying to keep a good level of Adequan in the joint for the entire 4 weeks. So. Awesome question. Nancy says, thanks, you're welcome. Oh, no, no worries, Sharon. Okay, Amber. Pulse electromagnetic therapy, home units, beneficial, waste of money. I don't know. Certain companies would have you believe that if it's not their brand, it's a waste of money. I feel like, I don't know, because so the issue with this is that the companies keep the pulse frequency as proprietary information, and they're going to tell you it's the pulse frequency that makes a difference in how effective it is. So if one company is like 500 pulses per minute and the other company is 300 pulses per minute, one might work better than the other, but they won't tell anyone what their pulses are. So we do have some studies with the specific CC Loop brand for back pain that showed effectiveness. I hear a lot anecdotally that says it's very effective. And they will have you believe that it is their pulse frequency that makes a difference. So that would lead you to think that these other companies, if they're lucky and they guessed the pulse frequency, maybe it'll work, but there's the potential that they have a totally different pulse frequency and it may not work. So it's a little hard to say. I would, there are a lot of studies for PEMF in people. Again, the studies might tell you pulse frequency, but trying to find that like a company to say, yes, our unit uses that pulse frequency, that's going to be what's hard about it. So generally, okay, so I feel like this is kind of coming back to the red light therapy. I would say pulse electromagnetic field therapy, I think, is less of a waste of money than red light therapy. If I was going to get one or the other, I would do the pulse electromagnetic therapy. If I was going to really deep dive into the PEMF therapy, I would go with a brand name. I do think it has benefits. I don't think it is a panacea and that it's going to fix everything. But I definitely think in the pain management realm, it can be an effective addition to help with pain management. Okay, Joe asks, have you heard much about the effectiveness of spring hip dysplasia? You know, Joe, I have looked into that because I am curious about it, and it comes up every once in a while in the rehab groups, and there haven't been a lot of people jumping on it and super excited about it. So I'm, based on that, going to say it's probably not a making a huge difference, but I do think it is a possibility of I guess I would think, for me, it would be worthwhile trying if you've tried a thing and you're, getting to the point where stuff is less and less effective, but you're still trying to avoid surgery. I don't think it would be out of the question to give that a try. But yeah, it's been out there for a while, and then it hasn't. It comes up more often as people saying, hey, as I use this, and usually there's like one or two and not many people like praising its ability, wonders and how good it is. So I have no personal experience with it, and I actually don't know anyone who's used it, a practitioner or patient. Michaela asks, what do you recommend for dogs entering into sports like agility? I had people say we need joint x-rays as well as be doing regular PT or preventative care. So Michaela, I do recommend joint screening. Again, go with like what is common in your breed, but generally I would say hips at a minimum, because a lot of these high drive dogs can have hip issues that are not symptomatic and don't show up till later. And if the earlier you know about them before they're symptomatic, the more you can do and hopefully keep them from ever being symptomatic. Now, again, depending on breed, you might also add in shoulders and elbows. I don't do a whole body scan. Again, kind of like look at risk factors to decide all I'm good x-ray, but border collies, basically, I think a minimum shoulders and hips. Elbows are starting to become more of a problem, so you might throw that in as well. I don't generally say you have to have spine, because I think most of the spinal issues that you're going to see in a lot of these dogs, like border collies or Malinois, they're not going to show up on an x-ray unless they're really, really bad. And in that case, you'll probably have noticed something. So so yes, that's my x-rays. I recommend, and in my practice, I do a sports physical. So I recommend all sport dogs have a sports physical when they are healthy to get baseline. So what I do, like I stance, I take measurements, I feel their joints. Sometimes I do find things that I'm like, oh, this needs to get checked out. Most of the time, it's just to establish a baseline and talk about fitness. But what's nice is if something does happen to those dogs, I've done a sports physical, I have stuff to compare back to. I do then recommend at least a yearly sports physical to keep up with it, as long as, they're competing. When they get older, that might become every 6 months. Or if they have sustained an injury that we've had to rehab them through, then it goes up to every 6 months they get a sports physical. I do like regular body work, and that when I talk about that, I mostly mean massage. So I do like that, and that's more of my preventative care. I do also recommend fitness, um, exercises to keep strong and purposeful for what sport you're doing. The other thing I will say, kind of as the regular PT, is I do have a program where, like, if you competed all weekend, you can come in, like Monday or Tuesday after competition, for kind of a body work and laser to like help with recovery after the competition for, sore muscles and that kind of thing. Again, that tends to be more as like the dog gets older, it gets more necessary rather than the younger dogs. But I do think it is important to have, like I said, those baselines established, the sport physical. I have found that is extremely helpful in my practice, when people have their sports physical, and then if they're worried about an injury or something wrong, I have that baseline to compare back to. Okay. Mackenzie asks, for dog with diagnosed luxating patella but no obvious gait changes effects, what sports would you recommend they avoid? Is agility a possibility, or most likely cause the luxating patella to become worse? So Mackenzie, I don't really look at things like that and think of like what they should avoid. I would approach it more as what we need to do to help tighten up those patellas. So doing exercises, strengthening them for that, and then strengthening appropriately for whatever sport you want to do. I don't think agility specifically would cause luxating patellas to become worse. Actually, there's the potential that in your keeping them fit and able to do agility, the patellas actually might get better. So especially something like that. So again, luxating patellas kind of fall in that category of it's loose. So we can do things to try and tighten it up, kind of similar to hip dysplasia is laxity. So we need to do things to help keep that joint tight. What I will say is, luxating patellas specifically, they're graded. And I do kind of have a cutoff. So if it's a 1 or 2, I feel like what I just described is possible to try. If it's a 3 or 4, we would go down a very different road, and that's where I would be more, 1, we definitely have a surgeon involved to talk about correcting it, and 2, that is where I would maybe where I would more address things that to be avoided. Okay, Amber, this is going back to the Adequan. If given more frequently, how do you dose it, or do you just split the monthly dose? I dose it their recommended dosage. So like, I always remember is 50 pounds, it's a mil, is their dose. If I'm giving it twice a month, they get a mil twice a month. If they're monthly, they get 1 mil once a month. If it's twice a week, they get a mil twice a week. So I don't change the volume, I change the frequency. The one thing I do is I'm a rounder, because most of the time I do teach the owners to give it themselves. And so I will round to the nearest 10, if that makes sense. So like if the math says there to give 0.63 mils, I'll go down to 0.6. If it's 0.68, I'll go to 0.7. So I just try and make the dosing as easy as possible for the owner to give. Okay, last comment was a thank you from Joe. And I'm going to cut it off at that because we have gone 55 minutes now. But that was an awesome session. I'm so excited with the participation and how many people chimed in and asked questions. Definitely let me know if you would like to do more just ask me anythings. I'm cool with this as long as I get this many questions, do that rather than like specific topics. What I will say real quick before I sign off is I do have a Jump Into Shape class that just started. It officially started 15th, although the students aren't going to get new exercises until tomorrow. So there's plenty of time to still jump in and you won't feel behind at all. There are working spots available, so check that out. Jump Into Shape is a fitness and jumping class. So it is specifically fitness for jumping. You get both jump exercises and fitness exercises, grids. I say it's a fitness class. It also gets used a lot as a problem solving class as well. So if you feel like your dog has jumping problems, it's a great class to work through those. And then, yeah, that's the newest thing that's happening. But definitely make sure to follow this page because I will keep posting updates there. Seeing as the next 2 Sundays are kind of holidays, with the next Sunday being Christmas Eve and then the next one being New Year's Eve, we'll probably skip those Sundays. So don't be looking for a Sunday Night Live then. But I think keeping this up in the new year is definitely something we can do. Some of you might be in it, but if you aren't, I just wanted to mention I do have a Patreon, and I did some new just in the past 3 days where I am posting all my training. So it is not just fitness anymore. I'm going to try to be better about filming all my training sessions with the dogs and posting the videos there where you can see it and ask questions and talk about it. So thank you guys all so much for participating and visiting me tonight. Have a good rest of the evening, a good week to come. I will see you guys later. Happy holidays. Bye.